The world ended on a Tuesday. Not with a bang, not with a mushroom cloud or some poetic asteroid, but with a confused chicken running through a burning village in the Amazon, screaming louder than the humans. If that image doesn't make sense to you, congratulations, you're not in charge of Earth's last defense protocol. Because the people who didn't flinch when the jungle lit up like a bonfire, or when the comms went silent, or when the satellites blinked out one by one. They only panicked when one specific file had to be opened. No name. No photo. Just the words, deploy if there's no one left to argue. In the densest, most impenetrable part of the Amazon rainforest, where no Wi-Fi dared reach and maps existed purely for decoration, something had fallen from the sky. Multiple somethings, actually, sleek and black and humming like they were bored. They didn't explode. They landed. Quietly. Surgically. Like scalpels cutting into the earth. Within 10 minutes the animals ran. The birds fell from the sky. Within 20, a reconnaissance team of 12 highly trained special operatives vanished without leaving behind so much as a gum wrapper. 21 minutes in, someone in a heavily secured war room swallowed hard and said the one thing no one wanted to hear. This isn't an invasion. It's a collection. By the time the rest of the world started forming committees and assigning blame, a chopper had already been dispatched. It flew low, silent, under radars, over trees so tall they'd never seen sunlight. The pilot didn't know who he was carrying. Just that he had no call sign, no papers, and no recorded history in any database dated after 2002. When the pilot glanced back once, only once, the man was tightening a blade to his hip, eyes closed, mouthing something to himself. Not a prayer. A calculation. The operator with no call sign had been activated. He landed before sunrise. No parachute. Just a glide suit and a scream of air that tore past the trees like a ghost. His boots hit dirt that was still steaming from where an alien pod had landed 3 hours prior. No greeting party. No orders. Just the thick humidity of the jungle, and the scent of something not from here soaking into the leaves. He crouched, ran 2 fingers along a track in the mud, and sniffed it. Not blood. Not oil. Not anything familiar. That meant it was dangerous. Good. He hated boring. He moved without sound, without hesitation. Every step had purpose. Every glance contained suspicion. The operator didn't talk unless he had to. The last time he spoke on record, a general resigned and a nation changed its borders. His silence wasn't mystique, it was strategy. But when he found the first corpse, he did say something. Cute, he muttered, inspecting the remains of a soldier whose insides had been turned outside, yet whose external armor remained perfectly intact. Some kind of surgical gravity field, he figured. Or a taste for irony. Either way, these things weren't here to conquer. They were here to dissect. An hour later, he found the rest of the unit. 12 men. No signs of struggle. All dead. Not killed in combat, terminated mid-thought. One still had his pen touching his notebook. Another was trying to light a cigarette. The operator crouched, looked up, and for a moment, just stood still. Something was watching him. Not from the trees. Not from the ground. From the air itself. It was a presence you couldn't see, couldn't touch, but could feel sliding along your skin like cold breath. He kept walking. By mid-morning, the jungle started shifting. Not in a metaphoric sense. Literally. Trees reoriented. Vines rearranged themselves. Paths that had once been clear now led in loops. He marked every step. Every leaf turned over. Then, after what felt like hours of walking in circles, he stopped. Raised his hand. Waited. One of them moved. Camouflage. Perfect mimicry of the environment. 8 feet tall, multi-limbed, and built like evolution had thrown out the concept of mercy. It stepped out of a tree. Not from behind it, from inside it. The operator watched as the creature examined him without aggression. It seemed to recognize something. Not a human. Not a threat. But maybe, a question. Then it vanished. Not ran. Not cloaked. It simply unhappened. The operator exhaled, then walked on. That night, he made camp near a stream. No fire. No tent. Just a tarp and the sound of something sniffling nearby. Not crying. Just confused. He turned and found a girl, mid-30s, soaked, bloody, lab coat torn to ribbons, but alive. She aimed a gun at him. He stared at it. "You'll miss," he said flatly. "How do you know?" "Because I'm still standing here." Dr. Nyla Cordero lowered the weapon. She had been part of a civilian research team sent to monitor jungle biodiversity. Her team had found something glowing underground. The next day, 3 of them started speaking a language no one knew. Then they exploded. Not externally. Linguistically. Their brains had overwritten themselves. She had run and kept running. Until now. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded. "You're with me now," he said, "already walking?" She followed. Mostly because she had no choice. But partly because she saw what he saw when they looked into the trees, shadows bending the wrong way. Noises that sounded like memory. Jungle sounds that didn't exist outside of dreams. And above all, a strange signal pulsing from the sky. Not communication. Not orders. A countdown. 200 hours. Then something. What, she didn't know. But she felt it. Later that night she asked who he worked for. He didn't respond. She asked his name. He didn't respond. She asked if they were going to survive. He looked at her. Smiled faintly. "That depends on how interesting this gets." He stood, vanished into the trees, and within minutes silence returned. 10 miles away, a tank squadron reported contact with enemy forces. Then silence. Then screams. The operator, watching from a ledge high above, crouched and observed as an entire mechanized unit was ripped apart, not with weapons, but with the environment itself. Trees speared through armor. Roots dragged soldiers underground. A final survivor tried to radio for help, but instead, his radio played a child's lullaby. The operator whispered to no one in particular. Finally, something interesting. And then he disappeared into the jungle. The jungle didn't sleep. It breathed. It pulsed with a rhythm older than language, and now it hummed with something else. Something layered beneath the chirps and rustles, a low, almost musical frequency that vibrated against bone but never quite touched the ears. Dr. Nyla Cordero was wide awake, sitting against a tree trunk, eyes twitching at every movement in the dark. The operator with no call sign hadn't returned since he vanished hours ago. He left no warning, no promise, and certainly no explanation. She considered trying to follow him but quickly decided against it. She'd seen what happened to the soldiers with guns and plans and shiny helmets. They had a strategy. They also had intestines flung across branches like party streamers. Strategy didn't seem to matter here. Then she heard it. A low whistling noise descending fast, followed by a thud, a curse, and something heavy crashing through underbrush. Nyla crawled toward the noise with a stick in her hand and the confidence of a squirrel with a death wish. She peeked over a root and saw a man lying in a shallow crater, blinking through a cracked visor, surrounded by smoke and bits of something that may have once been a parachute. He sat up, looked around, noticed her staring, and grinned. "Well, if this isn't the friendliest jungle welcome I've had all week," he said, pulling off the rest of his helmet. Nyla stared. "You're not with the operator, are you?" "Who, the tall, creepy guy who looks like he wrestles snakes for fun?" "Yeah. I'm his +1. Name's Boomer." He extended a hand, then looked around. "Wait, where is he?" "Gone. Vanished. Like everything sane in this godforsaken forest." Boomer nodded like that was the expected answer. He stood, brushed himself off, and began assembling what looked like a mobile bomb kit out of bits strapped to his thighs and backpack. Every motion was practiced, almost theatrical. He whistled as he worked. Nyla watched him, equal parts alarmed and intrigued. "You're carrying enough explosives to blow up a mountain." "Why?" Boomer smiled. "Because sometimes the problem isn't the aliens. Sometimes the problem is the real estate." Nyla blinked. You're not serious. Boomer winked. I'm never not serious. You'll learn to love that about me. Before she could question him further, a low growl interrupted their conversation. Boomer froze, hand mid-gesture. Nyla turned slowly. From behind the trees, 3 humanoid shapes began to emerge. Not fully visible. More like gaps in the world where light refused to reflect properly. The jungle seemed to reject their presence, but not out of hostility, more like fear. The creatures moved with precise, almost bored efficiency, spreading out in a half-circle formation. Boomer sighed. Right on schedule. He reached into his pack and tossed something small and metallic toward the middle one. It landed with a soft chime. A delay? Then light erupted, not an explosion, but a burst of concentrated static. The air rippled. The creatures shimmered, screamed in tones that hurt the mind more than the ears, and vanished. Boomer turned to Nyla, who was still holding her stick. I call that the ugly light. Works once. Don't ask me why. A rustle behind them announced the operator's return. He emerged from a completely unrelated direction, as if materializing between shadows. Boomer saluted lazily. Miss me, boss? The operator looked him over once, then turned to Nyla. The countdown accelerated. Whatever they're doing, it's speeding up. Boomer laughed, completely undeterred. Well, that's just rude. We haven't even had brunch. Nyla glared at him. You find all this funny? No. I find it terrifying. But my therapist says if I don't laugh, I explode. Sometimes literally. The operator motioned them forward. They moved quickly now, avoiding open areas, crossing streams that weren't on any map, and climbing ridges that reeked of ozone and something fouler underneath. They arrived at a clearing where a drone lay half-sunk in the mud. Not human. Definitely alien. Nyla approached carefully and crouched beside it. The operator watched in silence. This isn't just a scout drone, Nyla said. It's a data sponge. It's recording us. Every word. Every movement. Every thought it can interpret. They're not just observing, they're absorbing. Boomer leaned in, squinting. Does that mean it knows about the time I sang to my dog during a thunderstorm? Nyla ignored him and tapped at the device's surface. It shifted beneath her touch, reacting like it had skin instead of metal. The surface played back fragments of sound, mangled human voices, laughter, gunfire, then something she didn't expect. Music. Old music. From Earth. She stared at the others. They're listening to everything. History. Culture. They're rewriting their understanding of Earth from raw data. And they're doing it fast. The operator crouched beside the drone and pressed a pressure point. The drone shut down instantly. Nyla stared. How did you do that? I've seen this tech before. Wait, what? The operator stood, turned, and kept walking. Boomer followed, munching on a protein bar. He doesn't talk about it much. But let's just say he's been places. The jungle grew darker as they pressed forward, not just with nightfall but with something heavier. A weight in the air that crushed breath. Sounds began to overlap, echoes of conversations they hadn't had yet, whispers and voices that hadn't spoken. Nyla stumbled as a sudden image hit her, a memory she didn't own. A man she didn't know, holding her hand, saying goodbye. Her eyes welled before she could stop herself. Boomer caught her. Easy there, Doc. They're trying to get inside your head. They already are. She looked up. The trees were rearranging again. Faster now. Angry, almost. The countdown was affecting more than just time. Reality itself was being rewritten. Language twisted. Pathways looped. Even gravity had moments of confusion. The operator stopped ahead, staring into a narrow ravine. Something shimmered below. Not light. Not shadow. A gap. A place where the world didn't finish rendering properly. Boomer stepped forward, looked down, and immediately stepped back. Okay. Nope. That's enough cursed geometry for one day. The operator gestured down. We go in. Boomer blinked. Of course we do. They descended into the ravine. The shimmer passed over them like a curtain of static, and the world changed. The jungle was gone, replaced by a hollow dome of flesh and circuitry, pulsing with light and humming with distant voices. At the center stood a spire. Not tall, but infinitely deep. It vibrated with memory and something worse, intent. Nyla whispered. "This isn't a base. It's a brain." Boomer nodded slowly. "So, what's the plan?" The operator placed a small black device on the ground. It blinked once, then went dark. "We wake it up." As the spire responded with a groan like a continent shifting, something behind them stirred. The entrance had sealed. Boomer groaned. "Of course. Every damn time." The operator simply watched, unblinking, as the walls began to glow and the countdown ticked faster. From the heart of the spire, something began to speak, not in words but in thought. And it said one thing. "Who told you this story?" The dome pulsed with memory. Not memories of people or places, but of moments, every smile ever faked, every scream stifled, every glance that carried something unspoken. It was all in the air now, broadcast in waves that hit Nyla like invisible slaps. She could taste fear and smell joy and hear thoughts she had never had. The operator moved through the space like he had walked it before, like it was more familiar than daylight. Boomer kept one hand on the wall, not for balance but as a joke to himself, as if touching a giant alien brain made him smarter by proximity. He was humming something tuneless, either to stay grounded or because the silence made him nervous. Probably both. They didn't talk for a while. Talking made the thoughts louder. The dome echoed them back, distorted and raw. Nyla started hearing her mother's voice, asking why she never finished med school, even though her mother had died 4 years ago. Boomer started twitching at the corner of his eye, probably trying to ignore whatever childhood trauma the dome was serving him. The operator didn't flinch. He just kept walking toward the spire at the center. As they approached, the world blinked. It wasn't like a light turning off. It was like existence skipped a frame, like reality forgot a moment then decided to move on anyway. Nyla staggered. Boomer cursed and dropped a grenade without pulling the pin. The operator paused, glanced upward, then kept moving. He reached the base of the spire and pressed his hand against it. The surface rippled outward like water, and suddenly the floor beneath them turned to glass. Below, they could see a deep pit filled with figures, humans, soldiers, scientists, maybe even locals, all suspended in translucent cocoons. Not dead. Not alive. Dreaming, maybe? Or dreaming someone else's dream. Boomer leaned over and whistled low. "Well, that's a new kind of creepy." Nyla stepped closer, heart thudding. "They're not just studying us. They're copying us. Look at the posture, the alignment. These are simulations." Boomer frowned. "Why copy us? Why not just take over?" "Because," Nyla said, "their goal isn't invasion. It's imitation. But they don't understand the context. They're learning human behavior, but without emotion, without history. They're building a world based on impressions." The operator stepped back from the spire. It began to shift again, revealing a tunnel. No lights. No indicators. Just darkness stretching out ahead like a throat waiting to be swallowed. He entered first. Inside, the tunnel grew colder. Not physically, mentally. Thoughts slowed. Memories got fuzzy. Nyla started forgetting names. Boomer forgot why he liked explosions. The operator stopped suddenly and pointed forward. A figure stood in the dark, illuminated only by the glow of the walls. It looked human, wore standard-issue military gear, and held a rifle casually. As they got closer, the figure turned. Nyla gasped. Boomer cursed under his breath. It was the operator. Or something that looked like him. Same face. Same dead eyes. But this one smiled. "Hello again," it said. The real operator said nothing. The clone stepped forward, arms relaxed, not hostile. It spoke calmly. "You're not supposed to be here. This is a trial. A proving ground. You are the infection." Boomer leaned toward Nyla and whispered. "Okay, quick question. Are we sure we're on the good guy's side? Nyla ignored him and watched the two operators face off. The clone kept talking. You were supposed to be a story. A legend to scare the stars. Now you're wandering off script. You're disrupting the narrative. The real operator finally spoke. That's the point. Without warning, the clone lunged. No warning, no signal. Just a blur of movement. The fight was violent, fast, and silent. The operators moved like ghosts, their strikes impossibly precise, their counters like instinct. Boomer tried to jump in, but Nyla held him back. You'll just die faster. The fight ended with the real operator pinning the clone to the wall, a knife pressed into its chest. But the clone only grinned. This won't matter. We've already written you out. Then it dissolved into smoke. Boomer clapped once, sarcastically. 10 out of 10. Would watch again. They kept moving. The tunnel widened into another chamber. This one looked like a broken museum. Display cases held objects from Earth, old radios, children's toys, ancient weapons. Each was tagged with symbols that seemed to pulse like heartbeats. Nyla realized the aliens had been collecting for decades. Maybe centuries. This wasn't a new event. This was just the first time humanity noticed. She stopped in front of a display. It was a drawing. Crayon. A child's sketch of a family holding hands under a sun. The date on it was yesterday. But the picture was hers. One she made when she was 6. Her breath caught. Boomer pointed to another display. Hey, look. My mixtape from high school. That explains the cultural collapse. The operator stood in front of a shattered case. Whatever was inside had escaped. The label still pulsed with symbols. He stared at it longer than necessary. What was in there? Nyla asked. The operator didn't answer. Suddenly, the room shook. The dome was reacting to them. The countdown, somewhere deep in their heads, ticked faster. Not seconds, but moments. Important ones. They were running out of time, not to escape, but to remain unchanged. Boomer turned serious. We need to destroy this place. You can't, Nyla said. It's not just physical. It's narrative. They're trying to rewrite Earth through imitation. If we destroy it the wrong way, we risk becoming what they're replacing us with. The operator placed a small black cube on the ground. Then we do it the right way. The cube pulsed once, then expanded into a holographic display. It showed multiple timelines, converging and splitting. Possible outcomes. In every version, Earth lost. Except one. Nyla pointed. There. That one. Boomer squinted. That says we have to wake the archive? The operator nodded. We tell it our version of the story. The spire above them began to open like a flower, revealing a pulsing sphere at its core. The brain. Or maybe the pen. Whatever was writing Earth's replacement was waiting to be rewritten. Boomer looked up. So we're telling bedtime stories to an alien god? Something like that, Nyla said. The operator stepped forward. He placed his hand on the sphere. It pulsed. Then he spoke. Once there was a world that didn't fit. It was angry. Messy. Unfinished. And that was why it mattered. The sphere vibrated violently. The dome began to scream, not with sound but with resistance. Reality tried to reject the story. But the operator kept talking. It was filled with people who didn't agree, didn't understand, but still tried. And that contradiction made them strong. Their chaos was a weapon. Their flaws made them real. Nyla stepped forward. And they didn't want to be perfect. They wanted to be true. Boomer added. And they blew stuff up. A lot. For fun. And sometimes justice. The sphere pulsed faster. Then it cracked. A fissure split across it, and through it poured light, not just illumination, but sensation. Laughter. Pain. Regret. Hope. The operator turned to them. Now we run. The jungle welcomed them back with a silence that didn't feel earned. It wasn't relief or safety. It was the quiet before something worse. Behind them, the spire that once held Earth's replacement story had vanished, Not exploded, not collapsed, but simply ceased to exist. The ground where it stood was smooth and clean, like it had never been disturbed. Not even the dirt seemed to remember. Boomer kicked a rock just to prove it was still there, but it bounced once and rolled away like nothing had happened. Nyla stood with her hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath, eyes scanning for shadows that bent the wrong way. The operator didn't look tired. If anything, he looked more focused. Like the danger had finally become familiar. They didn't say anything for a while. No one had the breath for it. The jungle buzzed faintly, like a machine slowly turning itself back on. Then Boomer finally broke the silence in his usual way. So, just to recap, we invaded a brain, told it bedtime stories, and escaped through a memory hole. Anyone else feeling a little underdressed for this apocalypse? Nyla gave a weak smile, then winced. Her head still throbbed from the psychic pressure of the spire. Something had been downloaded into her. Or unlocked. She wasn't sure which. Images flickered in the corner of her vision. Not hallucinations. Not exactly. More like memories that didn't belong to her, peeking through like nosy neighbors. She turned to the operator. What happens now? He stared into the jungle. Now it gets worse. They set out again, moving quickly and deliberately. The trees had shifted back to their old positions, but the terrain was still warped. Plants blinked. Roots whispered. The air tasted like static. Nyla began noticing patterns in the wildlife, animals behaving in loops, repeating movements, like glitching programs. A monkey threw the same stick into the same bush every 5 minutes. A jaguar roared at a tree that wasn't there, over and over. Nature wasn't healing. It was buffering. Boomer tapped the side of his head. Is it just me, or are we stuck in Earth's weirdest software update? The operator stopped suddenly. Ahead, a river that should have been flowing was frozen in place. Not ice. Just stuck. Like someone hit pause on time itself. Boomer threw a pebble. It landed on the surface and bounced like rubber. Nyla approached and touched the water. Her hand didn't go through. It pushed back, resisting like thick glass. This isn't just physical. The collapse of the spire disrupted something deeper. The operator nodded once. The terraforming is still happening. But now it's unstable. They followed the river upstream until the glitch ended and reality seemed to resume. Along the bank, they found evidence of a recent skirmish. Empty shell casings, scorch marks, but no bodies. Just blood. And not all of it was red. Boomer crouched beside a black scorch on a rock. That's plasma damage. Looks like someone tried to put up a fight. Nyla found a helmet half sunken in the mud. Inside was a torn scrap of paper. A drawing. A tree with roots that stretched into the sky. A child's handwriting underneath read, "This is how the world ends." She showed it to the operator. He didn't flinch. They kept moving. By midday, they reached a ravine where the trees opened into a wide, natural amphitheater. Or at least, it looked natural from a distance. As they got closer, they saw the ground had been shaped, molded. The dirt had symbols carved into it, pulsing faintly. In the center stood a large crystalline structure, humming like a low song. Around it were bodies. Soldiers. Civilians. All standing upright. Frozen. Eyes open. Breathing. But completely motionless. Nyla approached one and waved her hand in front of his face. No response. She touched his shoulder. Still warm. Still human. Just paused. Boomer looked around nervously. It's like someone hit the snooze button on life. The operator examined the crystal. His hand hovered over it, not touching, just sensing. This is the anchor. The root of the transformation. The aliens aren't rewriting Earth by force. They're rewriting meaning. And this is their broadcast point. Nyla stared at him. How do you know all this? The operator finally looked her in the eye. Because I was built for it. Boomer blinked. Okay. That's a reveal. Care to elaborate? The operator didn't. Instead, he took a small device from his vest, placed it near the base of the crystal, and activated it. A sharp tone echoed through the amphitheater. The frozen people twitched, eyes blinking rapidly, mouths opening in silent screams. One fell over and started convulsing. Another began laughing hysterically. The air warped again, and the crystal flared. Boomer reached for his detonator. Say the word. I can make this thing very not here. Not yet, the operator said. We need to know how many more of these exist. Nyla suddenly clutched her head. A spike of pain shot through her skull. Visions poured in again, more detailed now. Cities transformed into looping thoughts, people rewritten as concepts. Earth turned into an idea, a fiction trapped in a logic loop. She gasped. There are 5 more. All over the globe. Different regions. Different broadcasts. But they're syncing. Once they align, the overwrite becomes permanent. Boomer looked at her, then at the operator. So what? We unplug each one? No, Nyla said. We change what they're transmitting. We can't just delete the story. We have to overwrite it with our own. Boomer shook his head. I left my storytelling voice back in boot camp. The operator stepped back from the crystal. It was shifting now, reacting to them. A face began to form on its surface. Alien yet familiar. It was trying to communicate. Or intimidate. Maybe both. Nyla stared at it. It's reading us. Let it, the operator said. Then he pointed at Boomer. You're up. Boomer looked like someone had asked him to sing opera on stage in his underwear. He stepped forward anyway, cleared his throat, and began talking. Once upon a time, there was a world that didn't follow the rules. It had bad weather, worse politics, and people who argued about sandwiches. But it was real. And sometimes, real is messy. The crystal shivered. The frozen people jerked like puppets. Boomer kept going. They made mistakes. They broke things. But they kept going. Not because they were perfect, but because they didn't know how to quit. The face on the crystal began to fracture. And sometimes they blew up stuff that messed with their planet. The crystal screamed. The operator nodded. Now. Boomer hit the detonator. A small, controlled charge embedded in the base ignited. The explosion wasn't large, but it was precise. The crystal cracked, then shattered. The pulsing light vanished. The frozen people dropped to their knees, dazed but alive. The ground stopped humming. For a moment, everything was still. Then a new sound echoed through the jungle. A deep, resonant tone that didn't belong to anything human. The operator turned to Nyla. They know we're fighting back now. Boomer grinned. Took them long enough. The jungle around them began to blur again, but this time not from alien interference. It was natural now. Rainclouds gathered. Animals called out. The static was gone. Nyla looked at the operator. If there are 5 more, we need to move fast. The operator nodded once. The next one's already listening. We need to tell it something better. And with that, they disappeared into the trees once more, racing against time, rewriting a planet with every step. The rain started without warning, heavy and thick, washing away footprints and blood in equal measure. It wasn't like normal rain. It tasted metallic. Boomer licked a drop off his lip and immediately spit it out with a grimace. It's like someone wrung out a robot, he muttered, shaking his head. The jungle had grown more hostile since the destruction of the anchor crystal. Nature fought back with desperation, vines crawling like veins across the trees, roots cracking under pressure, and animals acting as if they were stuck in the wrong century. Nyla noticed birds repeating the same flight path in loops, their wings occasionally glitching, stuttering midair. The spire's collapse hadn't freed the jungle. It had unbalanced it. They moved fast, guided by something Nyla had reluctantly begun to trust, her visions. Ever since that first contact with the spire, her mind had become a conduit for fragments of the alien network. Sometimes it was unbearable, like trying to drink from a fire hose of symbols and meanings that didn't align with human thought. But now, she'd learned to filter it, not understand exactly, but feel the shape of information. And right now, her instincts pulled her toward the northeast ridge, where the jungle sloped upward into mist-covered cliffs. The operator didn't ask how she knew. He never asked? Boomer did, but only once. Is this psychic compass thing going to lead us into another brain tower? Because I'm running low on witty one-liners and remote charges. Nyla wiped sweat from her brow and kept walking. The operator paused, scanned the horizon, then pointed ahead. There. The mist split unnaturally, forming a gap that was too symmetrical to be coincidence. They approached it carefully. The path ahead was lined with stone markers, not ancient ruins, but freshly grown structures made to look like history. Carvings showed scenes that hadn't happened yet. Cities in flames, skies cracking, oceans reversing. It was like a museum of potential ends. Boomer knelt by one of the stones. This is a warning. Or a checklist. Nyla touched one. Her vision exploded in white, then dissolved into an image of herself standing in front of a burning tower, screaming. But it wasn't her voice. It was someone else's memory layered over hers. She pulled her hand back, heart racing. They're not just rewriting Earth. They're creating predictive memories. Outcomes they want us to believe are inevitable. The operator said nothing, but his jaw tightened. They reached the top of the ridge and saw it. Another spire. This one wasn't hidden. It stood tall and sharp against the gray sky, a needle of logic piercing through chaotic land. But this one was different. It was protected. Surrounding the spire was a massive encampment of human soldiers. Or at least, they looked human. Boomer scanned with his scope and frowned. That's a NATO unit. But those guys are all supposed to be dead. Nyla focused, her mind buzzing. They're not dead. They've been rewritten. These are humans running on a different software. The operator watched them silently. Boomer sighed. So we're up against armed philosophical zombies. Great. They circled the camp and waited until nightfall. As darkness fell, the jungle grew louder again. Not natural noise. Speech. Whispers from the rewritten soldiers. They weren't talking to each other. They were reciting something. Over and over. A story? Boomer leaned closer. They're chanting. It's like a bedtime story for a god that doesn't sleep. The operator handed Boomer a small device. You know what to do. Boomer smiled grimly. One distraction coming up. He moved off into the trees, silent for once. Nyla and the operator waited. Minutes passed. Then the jungle lit up in blue fire. No sound at first. Just light. Then the noise came, like thunder through metal. Boomer had set off a chain of charges in a crescent pattern, forcing the attention of the soldiers away from the spire. As soon as the chaos started, the operator and Nyla moved in. The spire was guarded by only 2 sentries now. The operator approached them directly, and they didn't even react. They stood still, blinking out of sync, weapons pointed at nothing. Nyla whispered. They're stuck in the story loop. They don't see us because we're off script. The operator knocked them out with a fast movement, no struggle. They entered the spire. Inside was quieter than any place Nyla had ever known. Not silent. Empty. Like the air didn't carry sound at all. Every footstep felt stolen. Every breath a question. In the center, there was no brain, no crystal. Just a chair. And in that chair sat a man. Bound, but upright. Breathing. His eyes opened slowly as they approached. He looked like someone who had once been in charge of things. Maybe military. Maybe political. But now he looked hollow. They left me awake, he said, voice raspy. Said I had to witness. Said I was too stubborn to rewrite, so I'd just narrate. Nyla approached him carefully. Who are you? His eyes locked with hers, and something inside her twisted. Not fear. Recognition. I was the one who called for him. He nodded toward the operator. Years ago. When the first whisper came. We buried the truth. We turned it into fiction. We needed someone who could fight fiction with fiction. So we made him. The operator didn't move. He only said one thing. How much time? 3 hours. Then all 5 anchors align. One story. One truth. Earth becomes an idea, not a place. Boomer's voice crackled over the radio. Distraction's working, but I'm out of smoke and lies. Wrap it up. Nyla placed her hands on the arms of the chair. The spire pulsed. It had no brain, because the man had become it. A living story vessel. She felt the pressure building again. But this time, she was ready. She spoke. Once there was a lie that grew too large. It fed on fear and silence. But someone spoke anyway. The spire responded, vibrating. The man in the chair gasped, tears running down his cheeks. You're changing it. You're breaking the cycle. The operator stepped forward. You don't kill a story. You outgrow it. He placed the device on the floor. Another charge. But this one wasn't meant to explode. It was a speaker. And from it played the one sound the aliens had never understood. Laughter. Boomer's laugh, recorded from a dozen moments of idiotic joy and sarcasm and irreverence. Pure nonsense. The spire cracked. The rewritten soldiers outside began convulsing, their minds trying to reject the contradiction. The camp fell into chaos. Boomer rejoined them at the spire, bleeding slightly, but grinning. If we live, I'm buying everyone drinks. If we die, I'm haunting this jungle with fart jokes. Nyla helped the man from the chair. The spire was breaking, the logic unraveling. She looked at the operator. That's 2 down. 3 to go. The operator nodded. And they won't stay confused for long. As they left the crumbling structure, the jungle began to move again, reshaping behind them. This time, it didn't feel malevolent. It felt alive. The rain stopped. The air cleared. And somewhere, faint but real, a child laughed. The story was changing. They had made a dent. Now they just had to finish the rewrite before Earth forgot what it meant to be real. Asked ChatGPT. They crossed the final threshold as the sun bled through the canopy like a dying fire. The jungle had lost its voice. No birds. No rustling. No wind. It was as if the world had taken one last breath and now waited to exhale. They reached the edge of the final zone, and no one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because words had begun to lose their power. Language itself felt frayed at the edges, and meaning no longer held like it used to. Time was bleeding sideways. Nyla saw fragments of her past flickering in the trees. Her 7th birthday party in one leaf, the funeral of her mentor in another. Boomer kept scratching his arm, muttering about déjà vu loops and whether the sky always had that shade of wrong. The operator walked ahead with unflinching calm. He didn't look left or right. He moved like a man who had reached the end of a maze he never wanted to enter. Ahead of them stood the last spire. Larger than the others, pulsing not with light but with absence. It didn't shine or move. It devoured color. It bent shape. The sky above it flickered, alternating between day and night in jolting spasms. Nyla clutched her chest as her heart sank to the pulses. Boomer fell to one knee, cursing under his breath. This is the center, she said, panting. This is where all 5 anchors align. This is the rewrite point. The operator looked back at them. It's not just trying to rewrite Earth anymore. Boomer stood unsteady. You mean what, the universe? No, Nyla said, her voice thin. Us. It's writing us into something else. Into something manageable. Predictable. Believable. They approached slowly. The air resisted them like a thick gel. Each step felt like pushing through wet cement while gravity renegotiated its deal with the ground. Up was mostly still up, but sideways had new opinions. The operator led them through the distortion with precision, following the flicker patterns in the trees. He knew where the trapdoors were. He had seen this type of architecture before. Not in Earth's war rooms or alien ruins. In his own memories. Buried deep. As they entered the perimeter, something stepped out to greet them. It looked like a woman. Human. Early 30s. Brown eyes, weathered skin, calm smile. Nyla blinked hard. It was her. Exactly her. Clothing. Posture. Even the scrape on her arm from 2 days ago. I've been waiting, the devil said. Its voice was a touch too soft. The words hit too precisely. Boomer looked at Nyla, then back at the doppelganger. Okay. That's deeply uncomfortable. And also sort of flattering? The operator didn't break stride. He walked past the copy without a glance. It watched him, head tilted, like a cat observing a storm. Nyla followed him, heart racing. Her double didn't react, just faded like smoke. Boomer flipped it off as he passed. Inside the spire, there were no walls. No floor. No roof. Just an endless stretch of mirrored light, like standing inside the concept of reflection. Each surface showed different timelines. Different versions of their lives. Nyla saw a version of herself who had never joined the science program, who had become a writer, living in a tiny apartment, happy and irrelevant. Boomer saw a version where he had died years ago in a minefield, his body forgotten but his jokes living on as graffiti. The operator saw nothing. His reflections did not appear. They reached the core. It was not a machine or a crystal or a throne. It was a page. Hovering in midair. A sheet of impossible substance, blank, but vibrating. Waiting to be written. This is it, Nyla whispered. This is the final overwrite. Whoever writes on this controls the narrative going forward. Boomer looked around. Do we have a pen? The operator stepped forward. The page pulsed. Words began to form. Not typed. Not drawn. Manifested. They read like prophecy. Earth united. Humanity orderly. No conflict. No war. No freedom. Just balance. Just obedience. That's not a story, Boomer muttered. That's a prison with good lighting. Nyla stepped toward the page. Her mind filled with ideas. Not hers. Offers. Promises. Her brother healed. Her failures undone. Her name remembered. She staggered back. It's trying to bribe us. It doesn't care what we believe, as long as it's consistent. The operator reached into his coat and pulled out something they had never seen before. A coin. Old. Rusted. Worn. He flipped it into the air and let it land on the page. When it touched, the surface distorted. Not in pain. In recognition. A random act, he said. A thing it cannot control. The spire shuddered. The mirrored walls began to crack. The copies outside began to scream. Their forms twisted, no longer supported by a single narrative. Boomer ran up beside him, hands out. So what now? We just confuse it until it deletes itself? We give it contradiction, Nyla said. We give it reality. The good and the bad. The loud and the broken. Boomer grinned. Say no more. He stepped up to the page and spoke. Once there was a world so messed up, even its heroes were disasters. But they kept trying, because chaos was the only thing they knew how to love properly. The page pulsed. Nyla added her voice. They built. They broke. They sang off-key. They told lies for love and truths that hurt. And they were never consistent. But they were never fake. The operator stood between them and raised a small blade. Not to destroy the page. But to cut his hand. He let the blood fall onto the page. And they bled. The page erupted in light. Every timeline collapsed. The walls of the spire exploded outward in silence. The mirrors dissolved. The rain returned. The jungle breathed. The rewrite failed. The spire, now inert, began to crumble. Boomer stared at the page, now burned and falling like ash. Did we win? The operator turned and began walking. You don't win stories. You just survive them. They moved away from the ruins as the rewritten soldiers around them woke up confused and very human again. No memories of their time under the influence. Just broken dreams and missing hours. The jungle slowly resumed its shape, though it would never quite be the same. Nyla looked up at the sky. It was stable again. Blue mostly. A few clouds. One looked like a boot. What now? Boomer slung his bag over his shoulder. Now we tell it our way. In jokes. In scars. In unfinished sentences. The operator paused. He looked back once. Not at them. At the world. We remind the universe that the best stories are the ones you cannot predict. Then he walked into the trees and didn't look back. Nyla watched him disappear, unsure if they'd ever see him again. What was his name? She asked softly. Boomer shrugged. Doesn't matter. He had no call sign. But he left one hell of a plot twist behind.